Hey guys, tonight we slip through the crumbling stone archways of a medieval castle, where the air smells of damp straw and yesterday's stew. Picture yourself curled up on a lumpy mattress, the kind that crunches when you move, as a bitter dawn creeps through a slit in the wall. Torches flicker in the courtyard below, casting shadows that dance like ghosts on the frost-covered stones. Life here is raw, relentless, and, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. Everyone suffers, from the scullery maid scrubbing pots to the knight nursing a cracked rib, while the king sips wine in his velvet-draped chambers. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know who's listening from a cozy bed in Tokyo or a late-night couch in Chicago. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to a rooster's screech, the sound clawing through the pre-dawn chill. Your breath puffs in the air, visible in the dim light seeping through the narrow window. The straw beneath you is damp, poking through the threadbare blanket that barely keeps the cold at bay. This is no fairy tale castle with gleaming turrets. It's a fortress of grit and survival, built to withstand sieges, not to coddle its inhabitants. You're in the servants' quarters, a cramped attic above the stables, where the stench of manure clings to everything. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a sack stuffed with straw, crawling with fleas that bite your ankles raw. You scratch absent-mindedly, already dreading the day ahead. The castle is alive, even at this hour. Hooves clatter in the courtyard as grooms lead horses to water. A distant clang echoes, probably the blacksmith stoking his forge. You roll off the mattress, wincing as your bare feet hit the icy floorboards. Your tunic, patched and stiff with grime, hangs on a peg. You pull it on, the coarse wool scraping your skin. Breakfast is a fantasy. If you're lucky, you'll snatch a crust of bread later, assuming the cook doesn't swat you away. For now, hunger is just another ache, like the bruise on your shin from yesterday's stumble down the spiral stairs. Mainstream history tells us medieval castles, built between the 11th and 15th centuries, were strategic powerhouses designed for defense and control over surrounding lands. This one, perched on a rocky hill, has walls 10 feet thick, a drawbridge, and a moat that smells like a graveyard. But life inside? It's a hierarchy of misery. The king's at the top, untouched by the grind, while everyone else, servants, peasants, even nobles, pays the price. Historians still argue whether castles were more prison than palace for those below the royal rank, with some claiming the constant labor and confinement crushed the spirit as much as the body. A quirky tidbit: medieval folk believed sleeping with a knife under your pillow warded off evil spirits. You've got one. A rusty blade nicked from the kitchen, tucked beneath the straw. Does it work? Probably not, but when you hear rats scurrying in the dark, it's a small comfort. You grab it now, slipping it into your belt, just in case. The castle's full of threats, not all of them supernatural. The steward, with his beady eyes and quick temper, is worse than any ghost. You stumble down the creaking ladder, dodging a splinter that's caught you before. The air grows thicker, heavy with smoke from the great hall's hearth. Your day's work awaits, and it's not glamorous. You're a servant, one of dozens scurrying like ants to keep this castle running. Your first task is fetching water from the well, a job that sounds simple, but isn't. The bucket's heavy, the rope frays your palms, and the well's so deep you swear it's cursed. Last week, a girl swore she saw a face in the water. You laughed it off, but now, as you head toward the courtyard, you're not so sure. The castle's awake now, buzzing with noise. A dog barks, a baby wails, and someone's shouting about a spilled ale barrel. You pass a scullery maid, her hands red from scrubbing, and she gives you a tired nod. Solidarity, maybe, or just exhaustion. You're all in this together, bound by the castle's unyielding demands. The king, of course, is nowhere to be seen. He's probably still snoring under furs, dreaming of tournaments or taxes. Must be nice, you think, then push the thought away. Envy's a luxury you can't afford. Here's a joke to lighten the mood. Why did the servant bring a ladder to bed? Because even in dreams, they're climbing out of trouble. You smirk, but the humor fades fast. The well's in sight, its stone rim slick with moss. You grab the rope, bracing for the burn. Another day's begun, and it's going to be a long one. You trudge across the courtyard, the bucket's weight already tugging at your shoulders. The well rope's bite from yesterday stings your palms, but you've got no choice. Water's the lifeblood of this castle, and you're the one hauling it. The air's sharp with morning frost, and your breath clouds as you pass the stables, where a horse snorts and stomps. The steward's shadow looms somewhere nearby. You can feel his gaze ready to bark if you dawdle. His whip, coiled at his belt, isn't just for show. Last week, a boy got lashed for spilling a pail. You tighten your grip and move faster, the cobblestones slick under your worn shoes. The castle's a machine, and you're a cog, spinning endlessly. Your day's tasks are a blur. Water for the kitchen, firewood for the hearths, slop for the pigs. The steward, a wiry man with a face like sour milk, tracks every move. He's the king's enforcer, ensuring servants like you don't slack. You've heard whispers he was once a peasant, climbed the ranks by snitching. True or not, he's got power, and you've got none. You dodge his path, weaving past a cart piled with turnips, its wheel creaking like a dying crow. Mainstream history notes that medieval servants, often bound to the lord's estate, worked from dawn to dusk for meager rations and a roof. In a castle like this, housing hundreds, the servant hierarchy was rigid. Stewards ruled, while you, a lowlier sort, scramble to obey. Your life's not yours, it's the castle's. Historians still argue whether servitude was pure exploitation or a mutual pact, with lords offering protection for labor. Protection from what, you wonder, when the whip's your biggest threat? A quirky tidbit. Some servants used onion juice to fake tears, dodging punishment by looking penitent. You've tried it once, rubbing a stolen scrap on your cheeks when the steward caught you napping. It worked, but your eyes burned for hours. Now, you keep a sliver hidden in your sleeve, just in case. You're not proud, but survival's a game of tricks. The well's behind you now, and you're lugging 2 buckets toward the kitchen. Water sloshes, soaking your tunic's hem. The castle's awake, buzzing with chaos. A groom curses a stubborn mule, a maid hums a tune, then stops when the steward's boots crunch nearby. You pass the great hall, its oak doors cracked open. Inside, tapestries gleam, scenes of hunts and battles, stitched by hands as tired as yours. The king's throne, carved with lions, sits empty. He's probably still abed, you think, remembering that knife under your pillow from this morning. No spirits bothered you, but the steward might. Your arms ache as you reach the kitchen yard. The cook, a red-faced woman with a voice like a war horn, shouts for water. You set the buckets down, wincing as your shoulders pop. She barely glances at you, already barking at a boy stirring porridge. You're invisible unless you mess up. A joke bubbles up. Why's a servant like a ghost? Because nobody notices till something's broken. You stifle a grin, knowing laughter's a risk. The steward's close, his shadow flickering across the wall. The kitchen's your next stop, but first, you've got to dodge the steward's patrol. You slip behind a barrel, heart thumping. His boots pause, then move on. Safe, for now. You grab the buckets again, the handles digging into your raw palms. The castle doesn't care about your pain. It demands water, fire, food, and you're just the tool delivering it. A scullery maid passes, her hands cracked from lye. You nod, same as yesterday, a silent pact between cogs. She's got her own burdens. Pots to scrub, floors to sweep. You wonder if she's got an onion trick too. The day's just started, and you're already bone-tired. The buckets slosh again, cold water splashing your shins. You think of the king, warm in his furs, and bitterness stabs you. Push it down, you tell yourself. Envy's a trap. The kitchen's gate looms ahead, smoke curling from its chimney. You step through, bracing for the cook's next bellow. Another task, another hour, another day in this relentless grind. You step into the kitchen, the air thick with steam and the tang of boiling cabbage. The buckets clunk against the stone floor, water sloshing as you set them near the hearth. The cook, her apron stained with grease, glares over her shoulder, wielding a ladle like a scepter. "Faster next time," she snaps, then turns back to a bubbling cauldron. You nod, knowing better than to argue. The kitchen's a furnace, heat pressing against your skin, sweat already beading despite the morning chill outside. Pots clang, knives thud against wooden boards, and a boy fans the fire, his face smudged with soot. You grab a turnip from a pile, its skin rough and dirt-caked, and start chopping, the dull blade biting your palm. Chaos rules here. Cooks shout over each other, maids dart in with empty trays, and a dog slinks under a table, sniffing for scraps. The hearth roars, spitting embers that singe your sleeve. You're just one of many, a pair of hands slicing vegetables for a feast you'll never taste. The castle's great hall awaits its lords and ladies, who'll dine on roasted boar and spiced wine while you scrape by on gruel. Your stomach growls, loud enough that a nearby maid smirks. "Dreamin' of the king's table?" she teases. You shrug, too tired for a comeback. Mainstream history shows castle kitchens were the heart of medieval fortresses, feeding hundreds daily with rudimentary tools and open fires. This one, a cavern of smoke and noise, churns out meals for the king, his court, and the lower ranks, though portions shrink as you slide down the hierarchy. Historians still argue whether kitchen workers, often women, held subtle power. Controlling food meant controlling life, or were just another exploited cog. You feel like the latter, wrist aching as you hack through another turnip. A quirky tidbit. Medieval cooks sometimes used hedgehog fat as a cooking oil substitute, believing it added vigor to dishes. You glance at the sizzling pans, wondering if that's what's frying now. The smell's odd enough to make you suspicious, but you're not asking. The cook's temper is fiercer than the fire. You keep chopping, dodging a spray of grease as a pot boils over. A joke slips into your mind. Why's the kitchen like a dragon's lair? Because one wrong move, and you're toast. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Laughter draws attention, and attention draws trouble. The steward's whip from earlier lingers in your thoughts, a reminder to stay sharp. You remember that onion trick, but there's no crying your way out of this. The cook hollers for more wood, and you pivot, grabbing an armful from a stack by the door. The splinters jab your fingers, but you've learned to ignore small pains. They're as constant as the castle's demands. You toss the logs into the fire, sparks flying, and return to your turnips. A maid trips, spilling a tray of bread crusts, and the cook's bellow shakes the rafters. You keep your head down, blade moving in rhythm. The kitchen's rhythm is brutal, but steady. You slice, stir, carry, repeat, each task blurring into the next. A boy drops a clay pot, and it shatters, earning him a cuff from the cook. You wince, remembering your own mistakes. Once, you spilled ale on a knight's boots. The bruise took weeks to fade. The castle doesn't forgive clumsiness, especially not here, where every dish is a deadline. You glance at the cauldron, its steam curling like a ghost. The hedgehog fat rumor nags at you, probably nonsense. But in this place, who knows? Another joke. What's a cook's favorite song? Boil, boil, toil, and trouble. You smirk, then catch the cook's eye. She points to a sack of onions. "Start on those," she growls. You nod, grabbing one, its papery skin flaking under your fingers. The knife slips, nicking your thumb, but you don't flinch. Blood mixes with onion juice, stinging like fire. You wipe it on your tunic, already a map of stains, and keep going. The Great Hall's feast is hours away, but the kitchen's battle is now, and you're in the thick of it. You shuffle from the kitchen, the sting of onion juice still burning your thumb, and head toward the Great Hall, a tray of steaming bread balanced in your aching arms. The castle's heart hums with anticipation, its stone walls echoing with clinking goblets and the low murmur of nobles. You push through a heavy oak door, the air shifting from greasy heat to a cooler, wax-scented haze. Torches flicker, casting gold across tapestries woven with stags and swords. The long table gleams, set with silver plates you'll never touch. Lords and ladies lounge in furs, their laughter sharp as glass, while you weave between them, invisible unless you falter. Your stomach twists, hunger gnawing as the scent of roasted boar hits you. You set the tray down, careful not to rattle the bread. A knight, his beard flecked with wine, grabs a loaf without a glance. You're a shadow here, existing only to serve. The king's at the head, his velvet cloak pooling like ink, a golden goblet in hand. He's untouched by the castle's grind, his plate piled high while you dream of crusts. You linger, hoping for a fallen scrap, but a steward's glare sends you scurrying back for more trays. The feast is a spectacle, meats, pies, and fruits you can't name, all for those who never lift a finger. Mainstream history confirms medieval feasts were displays of power, with lords showcasing wealth through exotic dishes like peacock or swan. This hall, lit by chandeliers of dripping candles, hosts such excess nightly, while servants like you eat watery porridge. Historians still argue whether these banquets strengthened noble alliances or merely drained castle resources, leaving the lower ranks starving. You feel the latter, your empty belly a silent protest as you dodge a spilled goblet's splash. A quirky tidbit. Some nobles believed eating gold leaf improved their aura, sprinkling it on desserts like sacred dust. You spot a glimmer on a pastry, wondering if it's true or just rich fools wasting coin. Either way, you're not tasting it. You grab another tray, venison this time, its sauce dripping, and weave back through the crowd. A lady's perfume, sharp as vinegar, makes you sneeze, and she shoots you a look like you've insulted her bloodline. You mutter an apology, heat creeping up your neck. A joke to ease the tension. Why don't servants eat at feasts? Because the only thing they're served is trouble. You swallow a smirk, knowing a laugh could cost you. The steward's still prowling, his whip a coiled threat. You remember the kitchen's chaos, the cook's bellows, and that hedgehog fat rumor. Small battles compared to this hall's gilded pressure. Here, one wrong step could land you in the stocks. You set the venison down, the tray wobbling as a lord's elbow jostles you. He doesn't notice, but your heart skips, fearing a spill. The minstrels strike up a tune, lutes and drums filling the air. Nobles clap, some slurring from too much wine. You envy their ease, then push the thought away. Envy's a trap, like that onion trick you used on the steward. You glance at the king, his smile serene, untouched by the hall's chaos or your hunger. A servant girl passes, her tray shaking, and you nod, a flicker of solidarity. She's as worn as you, her eyes hollow. You wonder if she's got a knife under her pillow, like yours, for spirits or worse. Another tray, another trip. Your arms burn, your feet throb, but you keep moving. A lord calls for ale, and you fetch a pitcher, its weight pulling at your shoulders. You pour, careful not to drip, while he boasts about a hunt. You're invisible again, a cog in the feast's machine. A second joke. What's a noble's favorite game? Making servants run in circles. You bite your tongue, the pitcher steady. The hall's a world apart from the kitchen's fire, but the grind's the same, just dressed in silk. You slip back toward the door, ready for the next order, the next tray, the next fleeting hope of a scrap. You slip out of the great hall, the noble's laughter fading as the heavy door thuds behind you. The castle's pulse shifts. You're back in the damp, earthy world beyond the torchlight. Your tray's empty, but your hands still tremble from the hall's pressure. Now, you're headed to the fields, where the real backbone of this fortress toils. Peasants like you, bound to the land, breaking their backs for the king's table. The air bites as you cross the courtyard, mud sucking at your shoes. Rain's been falling all morning, turning the earth into a cold, clinging mess. Your tunic, already damp from kitchen steam, soaks through, chilling your bones. You trudge toward the outer gate, where fields stretch under a gray sky. The fields are a sea of muck, dotted with hunched figures wielding hoes. You grab one from a pile, its handle worn smooth by countless hands. Your job's simple but brutal. Plow, plant, pray the harvest doesn't fail. The soil's heavy, each step sinking ankle deep. You swing the hoe, muscles burning, as rain stings your face. A nearby peasant, an old man with hands like gnarled roots, coughs wetly. He's been at this decades longer than you, his life a loop of mud and hunger. You nod, but words feel pointless under the rain's drone. Mainstream history tells us medieval peasants, often serfs, were tied to the lord's land, working fields for a share of crops barely enough to survive. This castle's estate depends on them. Your labor feeds the feasts you just served. Historians still argue whether serfdom was a step above slavery or just a slower grind, with lords offering minimal protection for endless toil. You feel the weight of that debate in your aching shoulders, the hoe's thud a reminder of your place. A quirky tidbit. Peasants sometimes buried lucky stones in fields, believing they'd coax better yields. You've seen one. A smooth, river-worn rock, tucked under a furrow last spring. Did it work? The harvest was meager, but you're tempted to try it yourself, if only for hope's sake. You dig now, mud caking your hands, and wonder if that old man's got a stone hidden somewhere. The field's a battlefield, rain your enemy. Your tunic's a second skin, heavy and useless against the cold. A joke bubbles up. Why is a peasant's life like mud? It sticks, it stinks, and you're always sinking. You grunt, half smiling, but the humor's thin. The great hall's warmth feels a world away, those gilded plates mocking your empty stomach. You remember the onion trick from the steward's whip? The kitchen's grease? Small rebellions against this life. Out here, rebellion's just surviving another day. A shout breaks your rhythm. The bailiff, a squat man with a voice like gravel, rides by on a mule, barking at a boy who's paused to wipe his brow. You keep your head down, hoe moving. The bailiff's the steward's cousin in spirit, quick to punish. Last month, he fined a woman for lazy weeding. Her family starved for weeks. You glance at the old man. He's still digging, cough worsening. You wonder if he'll see next spring. The castle doesn't care, just as it didn't care when you hauled water or dodged the cook's ladle. Another swing, another clod of mud. Your back screams, but stopping's not an option. A woman nearby hums a folk tune, her voice cracked but defiant. You nod, a flicker of connection. She's got mud on her face, same as you. The fields bind you, a shared sentence. A second joke. What's a peasant's favorite dance? The one where you don't slip in the mud. You smirk, then wince as the hoe jars your wrist. The rain's heavier now, blurring the castle's towers in the distance. The king's up there, dry and fed, while you're here, drowning in earth. You think of that lucky stone again. Maybe you'll find one, bury it at dusk. It's foolish, but out here, foolishness is all you've got. The bailiff's mule snorts, his shadow passing. You dig faster, mud splashing, the castle's weight pressing down even in the open fields. You trudge back from the fields, mud caked to your knees, the hoe's weight still pulling at your shoulders. The castle looms ahead, its stone walls gray against the fading rain. You're not headed for rest, though. Your next task waits in the smoky haze of the blacksmith's forge. The courtyard buzzes as you pass, servants scurrying, a cartwheel creaking under a load of firewood. The air's thick with the tang of manure and wet straw, but as you near the forge, a sharper scent hits, charcoal and molten iron, heavy and alive. You step inside, heat slamming into you like a fist. The forge glows red, sparks snapping as the blacksmith, a bear of a man with arms like oak, swings his hammer. You're his helper today, tasked with pumping the bellows and fetching tools. The bellows groan as you push, air feeding the fire until it roars. Sweat beads on your forehead, mixing with field mud. The blacksmith grunts, shaping a horseshoe, each strike ringing in your ears. Sparks fly, one grazing your arm with a sharp sting. You flinch, but keep pumping. Pausing means a curse from the smith, or worse, a docked ration. The forge is no place for weakness. It's a crucible, forging iron and breaking men. Mainstream history notes, medieval blacksmiths were vital, crafting everything from swords to plowshares. Their forges the engine of castle life. This one, tucked against the outer wall, runs day and night, supplying the king's knights and peasants' tools. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths held status or were just skilled drudges, their value tied to output, not respect. You feel the drudge part, your arms burning as the bellows resist. The smith's impatience, a weight heavier than mud. A quirky tidbit. Some blacksmiths swore by moonstruck iron, believing metal forged under a full moon was stronger. You glance at the smith, wondering if he buys into it. He's hammering away, oblivious, but the horseshoe's glow feels almost magical in the firelight. You shake off the thought, pumping harder. A joke surfaces. Why's a blacksmith like a poet? Both beat something into shape, but only one gets burned. You stifle a grin, knowing the smith's not one for humor. The forge's heat is relentless, your tunic sticking to your skin. You remember the field's cold rain, the great hall's fleeting warmth, each task a new kind of suffering. That onion trick from the steward's whip feels useless here. No tears will sway the smith. You fetch a tongs from a rack, its handle hot enough to blister. The smith takes it without a word, plunging it into the fire. You're invisible again, a cog in the castle's endless machine. A spark lands on your wrist, and you hiss, shaking it off. The smith doesn't notice, his hammer steady. The bellows creak, your rhythm faltering as fatigue sets in. You think of that lucky stone from the fields, buried for hope. Maybe the smith's got his own charm, some iron scrap blessed by a monk. You doubt it. His scowl suggests he trusts only his hammer. A second joke. What's a forge's favorite song? Ring of Fire, obviously. You bite your lip, the heat blurring your thoughts. The smith barks for charcoal, and you scramble to a pile in the corner, its dust coating your hands. You haul it back, coughing, the forge's smoke clawing your throat. A servant passes the door, hauling water like you did at dawn. You nod, a flicker of recognition. He's got his own scars. Whip marks, probably, like the ones you've seen on others. The castle binds you both, its demands unyielding. The smith dunks the horseshoe in a barrel, steam hissing like a dragon. Keep pumping, he growls. And you do, arms screaming. The king's knights will ride on these shoes, while you'll limp back to your straw mattress, sparks still stinging. You wonder if the king's ever seen this forge, felt its heat. Probably not. His world's all silk and wine, not fire and iron. You stumble out of the forge, the heat still clinging to your skin, sparks stings fading into a dull throb. The courtyard's a blur of motion, servants hauling sacks, a dog chasing a rat. But you're headed to the solar, the lady's private chamber, where the castle's softer side hides behind stone walls. Your new task is to deliver a basket of linen, fresh from the laundress, to the lady of the castle. The basket's heavy, its damp weight pulling at your arms as you climb a spiral stair, each step worn smooth by centuries of feet. The air cools as you ascend, trading the forge's smoke for a faint whiff of lavender and wax. You knock on the solar's oak door, its iron hinges creaking as a maid lets you in. The room's a world apart, tapestries of unicorns, a fire crackling in a carved hearth, and the lady herself, seated by a window, her needle flashing through silk. She's young, her face pale under a velvet headdress, but her eyes are sharp, tracking you as you set the basket down. You're to stay, the maid whispers, to help with her embroidery. You nod, though your hands, rough from hose and bellows, feel clumsy here. The solar's quiet, but it's no haven. Politics and duty trap the lady as surely as mud traps you. Mainstream history shows noblewomen in medieval castles managed households and alliances, their lives governed by marriage and status, not choice. This lady, likely wed to secure a treaty, spends her days stitching and praying, her freedom a myth. Historians still argue whether such women wielded subtle influence through charm or were mere pawns in male games of power. You see her stiff posture, the tight line of her mouth, and guess she's more prisoner than queen. A quirky tidbit. Some noblewomen used love charms, herbs like vervain sewn into hems, to sway their husband's favor. You notice a faint herbal scent on the lady's sleeve, wondering if she's tried it. Her husband, the lord, is often away, hunting or scheming. You pick up a needle, pricking your finger instantly, and stifle a wince. The lady doesn't look up. Her stitches precise, each one a silent rebellion against her gilded cage. You sit on a stool trying to mimic her, but your thread tangles. The maid smirks and you flush, remembering the forge's blunt labor. A joke bubbles up. Why is embroidery like a siege? Both take forever and test your patience. You keep it to yourself, The solar's no place for jests. The lady's silence is heavy, broken only by the fire's pop and the wind rattling the window's leaded glass. You think of the field's mud, the kitchen's chaos, each task a different chain. Here, the chain's invisible, woven from expectation and etiquette. The maid hands you a new thread, her fingers soft compared to yours. You envy her ease in this world, then catch yourself. Envy's a trap, like that onion trick from the steward's whip. You glance at the lady, her needle pausing as she stares out the window. Beyond, the castle's towers loom, and you wonder what she sees. Freedom, or just more walls? A second joke. What's a lady's favorite escape? A daydream that doesn't unravel like her thread. You bite your lip, focusing on your clumsy stitches. A tapestry on the wall shows a maiden and a dragon, its colors vivid despite the years. You wonder who stitched it, how many hours it took. The lady speaks suddenly, her voice low, asking for a different shade of blue. You scramble to a basket, finding it, and hand it over, your rough hand brushing her smooth one. She doesn't flinch, but her eyes meet yours. A flicker of something. Pity, maybe, or recognition. You're both trapped, just in different cages. The maid whispers for you to sweep the hearth, and you grab a broom, ashes swirling as you work. The lady resumes stitching, her world small but heavy. You think of that love charm, the field's lucky stone, superstitions binding you all. The king, untouched by these struggles, sleeps in silk while you and the lady labor in your own ways. The solar's warmth is a lie. The castle's grip is cold, even here. You leave the solar, the lady's quiet world fading as you descend the spiral stairs. The broom's ash still dusting your hands. The castle's pulse quickens now. You're headed to the training yard, where knights hone their brutal craft. The air shifts as you step outside, carrying the tang of sweat and oiled steel. The yard's a churned patch of dirt, ringed by wooden fences, where armored men clash under the late morning sun. You're here to fetch water for the squires, but first, you're roped into helping a grizzled knight don his armor. The breastplate's heavy, its edges digging into your palms as you lift it, the knight grunting as you strap it on. His eyes, hard as flint, don't meet yours. You step back, grabbing a bucket, and head to the yard's well. The clang of swords echoes, mixed with shouts and the thud of wooden shields. Knights spar relentlessly, their breath puffing in the cool air, while squires, boys barely older than you, scramble to keep up, dodging blows. You fill the bucket, water sloshing, and weave through the chaos, your tunic catching on a splintered fence. A squire, his face bruised, grabs the bucket without a word, spilling half as he stumbles back to his knight. You wince, knowing you'll haul more. Mainstream history tells us medieval knights were the castle's elite warriors, trained from boyhood in combat and loyalty, their lives a mix of glory and grind. This yard, scarred from years of practice, shapes men for war, but the cost is high. Broken bones, scarred flesh. Historians still argue whether knighthood was a path to honor or a brutal trap, chaining men to violence for the king's gain. You see the squire's limp, the knight's scowl, and lean toward the latter. A quirky tidbit. Some knights wore lucky relics, saints' bones or cloth scraps, tucked into their armor, believing they'd ward off death. You spot a squire clutching a small pouch at his belt, maybe holding such a charm. Does it work? The bruises on his arms suggest no, but you get it. Hope's a shield, even a flimsy one. You grab another bucket, the rope burning your palms, a faint echo of the forge's heat from earlier. The yard's a storm of motion. A knight lands a blow, his sparring partner staggering. You dodge a stray shield, heart jumping. A joke slips in. Why is a knight's life like a bad dance? Too many steps and someone always gets hurt. You swallow it, knowing laughter's a risk here. The training's relentless, like the field's mud or the solar's stitches. Different cages, same castle. You think of the lady's herbal charm, the peasant's lucky stone. Superstitions everywhere, even in this sweat-soaked yard. A squire trips, his sword clattering, and a knight barks a curse. You keep moving, hauling water, your arms screaming from the day's endless tasks. The knight you helped earlier swings his blade, the air whistling, His armor gleams, but you know its weight, literal and not. You're a cog again, unseen unless you falter. A second joke. What's a squire's favorite bedtime story? One where he survives training. You smirk, then catch a night's glare and drop your eyes, bucket sloshing. You pass a boy polishing a helm, his hands raw. You nod, a flicker of solidarity, like with the kitchen maid or the field peasant. He's got his own scars, maybe from a training blow or a master's temper. The castle binds you both, its demands carving marks deeper than swords. The well's rope frays your hands again, a familiar sting. You think of the king, safe in his velvet, never stepping foot in this yard. His knights fight for him, bleed for him, while you haul their water, your own fight just to get through the day. The sun climbs, warming the yard, but you're cold inside, fatigue settling like damp straw. A knight calls for more water, and you trudge back to the well, the bucket's weight a reminder of dawn's first task. The yard's chaos swirls, steel flashing, and you weave through, invisible, aching, bound to the castle's unyielding rhythm. You drag yourself from the training yard, the clang of swords still ringing in your ears, bucket abandoned by the well. Your hands, raw from rope and labor, tremble as you head toward the castle's schoolroom, a cramped chamber tucked above the chapel. The air shifts as you climb a narrow stair, the scent of sweat and steel giving way to musty parchment and candle wax. Your task now is to deliver a stack of slates to the tutor, a sour-faced cleric who drills the castle's children in Latin and manners. You clutch the slates, their edges biting your fingers, and push open the door. The room's dim, lit by a single window, where a dozen children sit on benches, muttering conjugations under the tutor's glare. You set the slates on a table, dust puffing from the worn wood. The tutor, his robe stained with ink, doesn't acknowledge you, his rod tapping the desk like a metronome. You're to stay, sweeping the floor while the lesson drones on. The children, nobles' sons and daughters, plus a few sharp peasant boys, recite verbs, their voices flat, eyes darting to the rod. A girl, maybe 10, fumbles a phrase, and the tutor's rod cracks against her knuckles. She bites her lip, no tears, and you sweep faster, ash and grit swirling under your broom. Mainstream history notes medieval education, even in castles, was harsh, blending Latin, scripture, and discipline to mold loyal subjects. This schoolroom, with its cold walls and rigid rules, prepares children for roles they can't escape: knights, ladies, or priests. Historians still argue whether such schooling built character or just obedience, breaking spirits to serve the king's order. You see the girl rub her knuckles, her face set, and suspect it's the latter. A quirky tidbit. Some tutors used memory charms, rhymes carved on wax tablets, to help children learn faster, claiming they pleased the saints. You spot a tablet on the tutor's desk, its surface scratched with odd symbols. Does it work? The girl's still stumbling, so probably not, but you get the urge to carve one yourself, if only to survive this day. You sweep, straw bristles catching on a cracked floorboard, and think of the training yard's relics, the lady's herbal charm. Hope's a thread, thin but stubborn. The room's stifling, despite the chill. A boy mutters a wrong tense, and the rod snaps again. You flinch, remembering the steward's whip, the blacksmith's sparks. A joke bubbles up. Why is a schoolroom like a battlefield? Because every mistake draws blood. You swallow it, broom moving. The children's eyes are dull, their futures mapped. War for the boys, marriage for the girls, all for the king's glory. You're luckier, in a twisted way. No one expects anything from you but labor. Still, the rod's crack makes your stomach twist. You sweep under a bench, dust stinging your eyes. The tutor drones about virtues, his voice a monotone hum. You think of the field's mud, the forge's heat, each task a different whip. A second joke. What's a child's favorite lesson? The one that ends without a bruise. You bite your lip, catching a boy's glance. He's got ink on his cheek, a faint bruise on his wrist. You nod, a flicker of understanding, like with the squire or the kitchen maid. The castle binds you all, its lessons carved in fear. A girl drops her slate, the clatter cutting the tutor's lecture. He looms over her, rod raised, and you pause, broom still, heart thumping. She scrambles to pick it up, apologizing in a whisper. The rod lowers, but the threat lingers. You resume sweeping, slower now. The slate's weight still heavy in your memory. The king's children, if he has any, aren't here. They're spared this rod, learning from private scholars in cushioned rooms. The king's world is silk and ease, while you and these children choke on dust and dread. The lesson drags, Latin verbs blending into a dull roar. You finish sweeping, piling grit by the door, and the tutor snaps for you to leave. You nod, slipping out, the slate's edges still stinging your hands. The stair's cold, but the schoolroom's weight clings, heavier than mud or iron. Another task waits, another cog in the castle's grind, and you descend, bracing for what's next. You descend from the schoolroom, the tutor's rod still echoing in your mind, and make your way through the castle's twisting corridors. The air grows damp, heavy with mildew, as you head toward the dungeon, a place whispered about in hushed tones. Your task is to deliver a sack of moldy bread to the guard, rations for prisoners you've never seen. The stone steps spiral down, slick under your worn shoes, and the torchlight flickers, casting shadows that twist like specters. The smell hits first, rot, sweat, and something sharper, like despair. You clutch the sack, its coarse weave scratching your raw hands, and pause at the iron-bound door. A guard, his face pocked and grim, grunts for you to hurry. You step inside, the darkness swallowing you. Chains rattle somewhere deep, and a muffled groan cuts through the silence. The guard takes the sack, tossing it onto a table where a rusty knife sits, crusted with who knows what. You're to sweep the floor, grit and worse, while he checks the cells. You grab a broom, its bristles half gone, and start. The scrape of straw against stone loud in the oppressive quiet. The dungeon's a maze of cells, their bars black with grime, and you try not to look, but the sounds, whispers, coughs, a sob, pull your eyes. Who's down here? Thieves? Traitors? Or just someone who crossed the wrong lord? Mainstream history confirms medieval dungeons were grim, used for criminals, political rivals, or unlucky debtors, often left to rot in squalor. This one, carved deep beneath the castle, holds the king's enemies, real or imagined, their fates sealed by his word. Historians still argue whether dungeons were more about punishment or control, a way to silence dissent while keeping the castle's order. You hear another groan, fainter now, and figure it's both, pain and power, hand in hand. A quirky tidbit. Some prisoners scratched curse marks on cell walls, believing they'd hex their captors. You spot one as you sweep, a crude spiral etched near a cell door, barely visible in the torchlight. Does it work? The guard's scowl suggests he's not cursed, but you wouldn't mind carving one yourself, if only to feel less helpless. You keep sweeping, dirt and straw piling, your broom catching on a loose stone. The guard's boots echo as he returns, muttering about a prisoner who won't eat. You don't ask why. Questions are dangerous here. The dungeon's cold seeps into your bones, a stark contrast to the forge's heat or the solar's false warmth. You think of the schoolroom's rod, the field's mud, each task a link in the castle's chain. A joke surfaces. Why's a dungeon like a bad dream? You're trapped, and no one hears you scream. You swallow it, the broom's rhythm steadying you. The guard slices the bread, crumbs falling like ash. You wonder if the prisoners get even that much, or if rats claim it first. A chain clanks, loud and sudden, and you freeze, broom still. The guard doesn't flinch, but your heart races. You think of that onion trick from the steward's whip, useless here. No tears will sway this place. A second joke. What's a prisoner's favorite song? Break the chains. But they never finish the tune. You bite your lip, sweeping faster. The guard points to a corner where filth's piled thicker, and you move, nose wrinkling at the stench. A rat skitters past, bold and fat, and you swing the broom, missing. The guard snorts, a rare crack in his stone face. You pass a cell, its occupant a shadow slumped against the wall. You don't look long. Eyes invite trouble. The castle's hierarchy is clearest here. The king above, untouched. You, scraping by, and these souls buried alive. You nod to no one, a reflex from the yard, the kitchen, the fields. Solidarity's pointless in the dungeon, but it's all you've got. The guard barks to finish up, and you pile the sweepings, your hands shaking, not just from cold. The dungeon's secrets cling, heavier than mud or sparks, as you climb the stairs. The doors thud a relief you don't admit. You emerge from the dungeon's chill, the echo of chains fading as you climb back into the castle's bustle. The air lightens, carrying the scent of incense and beeswax as you head toward the chapel, a small stone sanctuary tucked near the great hall. Your task is to deliver a bundle of candles to the chaplain, a gaunt man who spends his days praying for the castle's souls. Your shoes, still crusted with dungeon grime, scuff the floor as you weave through corridors, dodging a maid balancing a tray of linens. The chapel's door, carved with crosses, looms ahead, and you knock, the sound swallowed by the stone. The chaplain's voice, thin as parchment, bids you enter. Inside, the air's heavy with sanctity, candles flickering on an altar draped in white. The chaplain kneels, his robes pooling, muttering prayers you barely catch. Latin, always Latin. You set the candles on a bench, their wax smooth under your rough fingers, and he gestures for you to stay, pointing to a broom. Sweep the floor, he mouths, not breaking his chant. You nod, grabbing the broom, its handle worn like every tool in this castle. The floor's cold, scattered with dust and wilted herbs from yesterday's service. You sweep, the soft scrape blending with the chaplain's drone, while stained glass saints stare down, their colors muted in the noon light. Mainstream history notes medieval chaplains were spiritual linchpins, offering masses and confessions to keep the castle's sins at bay. This chapel, with its worn pews and iron cross, serves the king's court, though you suspect the king's prayers are more for show than salvation. Historians still argue whether chaplains held real influence or were just pious props, their words drowned by the castle's earthly power. You see the chaplain's trembling hands, his eyes fixed on the altar, and wonder if he doubts the souls he's saving, a quirky tidbit. Some chaplains sprinkled salt in corners, believing it repelled demons. You spot a faint white pile near the altar, half swept by your broom, and wonder if it's true. Demons or not, the castle's got enough evil. Greed, cruelty, that dungeon's stench. You keep sweeping, herbs catching in the bristles, their faint scent a ghost of the lady's solar. A joke slips in. Why's a chaplain like a candle? Both burn out trying to light the dark. You swallow it, the broom's rhythm steady, knowing humor's out of place here. The chapel's quiet, but it's not peaceful. The chaplain's prayers falter, a cough breaking his chant. He's old, frail, his faith a weight heavier than your mud-caked hoe. You think of the dungeon's curse marks, the schoolroom's charms. Hope's a fragile thing, even here. The broom snags on a cracked tile, and you pause, glancing at the altar. A silver chalice gleams, untouched by the castle's grime. The king drinks from it during mass, you've heard, while you and the servants sip from clay. His sins, like his wine, seem to slide away. A second joke. What's a chaplain's favorite prayer? One that drowns out the castle's lies. You bite your lip, sweeping faster. The chaplain rises, joints creaking, and lights a new candle, its flame wavering. He doesn't look at you, his world narrowed to the altar, but you feel his exhaustion, a mirror to your own. You pass a pew, its wood polished by years of noble knees. A servant girl slips in, head bowed, and you nod. A flicker of recognition, like in the fields or forge. She's praying, maybe for escape, maybe for strength. You've got no prayers left, just tasks. The broom piles dust by the door, and the chaplain gestures for you to leave. You nod, slipping out, the candle's weight still lingering in your hands. The chapel's sanctity clings, but it's thin against the castle's grind. Mud, sparks, rods, and whips. You think of the king, his soul cleansed by gold and ritual, while yours is buried under labor. The corridor's busy now, servants rushing, and you merge into the flow, bracing for the next task, the next turn of the castle's relentless wheel. You slip from the chapel, the faint glow of candles fading as you re-enter the castle's clamor. The corridor hums with footsteps and muffled shouts, but your next task pulls you to the outer walls, where masons labor to keep the fortress standing. You're to haul stones, a job that makes the dungeon's broom feel light. The air bites as you step into the courtyard, the afternoon sun weak behind a veil of clouds. Scaffolds cling to the castle's battlements, ropes creaking under buckets of mortar. You grab a stone from a pile, its weight jarring your spine, and shuffle toward a mason, his hands gray with dust. He points to a gap in the wall, where wind whistles through cracked mortar, and you set the stone down, back already screaming. The wall's a patchwork of repairs, centuries of storms and sieges leaving scars. You lift another stone, grit scraping your palms, and climb a rickety ladder. The mason's orders sharp in your ears. The castle's strength depends on these walls, but the work's brutal. Fingers bleed, shoulders buckle. A boy nearby drops a stone, its thud earning a curse from the mason. You keep moving, knowing a mistake could mean a night without supper. The wind cuts through your tunic, a cold reminder of the field's rain. The forge's heat, each task a new ache. Mainstream history confirms medieval castle walls, often 10 feet thick, were built and maintained by skilled masons and armies of laborers, their work ensuring defense against invaders. This wall, pocked with arrow slits, has held for generations, but it's a hungry beast, demanding constant care. Historians still argue whether such labor was a point of pride, building the king's legacy, or just another form of servitude, crushing men under stone and time. Your throbbing back votes for the latter as you haul another rock, the ladder swaying under you. A quirky tidbit. Some masons carved tiny faces into stones, believing they'd watch over the castle. You squint at the block in your hands, half expecting a grin, but it's just rough granite. Maybe the masons got one hidden, a secret smirk for the ages. You set it in place, mortar oozing, and wipe sweat from your brow. A joke bubbles up. Why's a mason like a poet? Both carve meaning into something hard, but only one gets crushed. You swallow it, the wind stealing your breath as you climb down for another stone. The scaffold creaks, a rope fraying where it rubs the wall. You think of the chapel's salt, the dungeon's curse marks, small acts of defiance against the castle's weight. A second stone slips in your grip, grazing your shin, and you hiss, but the mason's glare keeps you moving. You remember the schoolroom's rod, the knight's bruises, pains the castle's currency, paid by all but the king. A laborer passes, his arms full, and you nod, a flicker of solidarity, like with the praying girl or the squire. His eyes are dull, his hands cracked. The castle binds you, its walls rising on your sweat. A shout breaks your rhythm, the mason, barking for lime. You scramble to a cart, hauling a sack that burns your raw palms. The powder puffs, stinging your eyes, and you blink back tears. No onion trick needed here. A second joke. What's a wall's favorite story? One where it doesn't crack under pressure. You smirk, then cough, lime dust clawing your throat. The mason slaps mortar onto your stone, his trowel scraping. The wall grows inch by inch, while you shrink, worn by the day's endless tasks. The king's banner flaps above, untouched by this grind. He'll never lift a stone, never feel the ladder's sway. You wonder if he knows the faces in the walls. If he cares. Probably not. His world's feasts and furs, not dust and blood. The mason points to another gap, and you trudge back to the pile, the stones blurring into one heavy truth. The castle stands because you break. The wind howls, the scaffold groans, and you lift again, bound to the wall's unyielding hunger. You stumble down from the scaffold, stone dust clinging to your hands, the mason's shouts fading as you leave the wall's grind behind. The castle's courtyard swirls with evening chill, but there's no rest. Winter's grip is tightening, and you're tasked with hauling firewood to the great hall. The air bites your face, frost crackling underfoot as you head to a lean-to stacked with logs. Each one's heavy, splinters jabbing your raw palms, but you pile them in your arms, the weight a familiar ache, like the stones, the buckets, the endless tasks before. The sky's a bruise, dusk settling, and the castle's windows glow, mocking the cold seeping into your bones. You trudge toward the hall, breath puffing in clouds, passing servants wrapped in threadbare cloaks. The firewood's for the nobles, their feasts warmed by your labor, while you'll huddle later by a dying ember in the servants' quarters. You dump the logs by the hearth, its faint heat teasing your numb fingers, and a steward snaps for more. You nod, turning back to the lean-to, the frost now glazing your tunic's hem. Winter's cruel here, a thief stealing warmth, food, hope. You think of summer's mud, the forge's fire. Seasons change, but the castle's demands don't. Mainstream history confirms medieval winters were brutal, with castles barely insulated, their thick walls trapping cold as much as arrows. Firewood was a lifeline, hoarded for the lord's comfort while servants and peasants shivered. Historians still argue whether winter unified castle life, everyone fighting the cold, or deepened its divides, with the king's furs a stark contrast to your rags. Your chattering teeth pick a side as you haul another load, the logs bark scraping your wrists. A quirky tidbit. Some believed rubbing snow on door frames kept winter spirits out. You've seen a maid do it, her hands red, muttering charms. Does it work? The frost creeping through your shoes says no, but you're tempted to try, if only to feel something other than numb. You stack more wood, the pile growing as your energy shrinks. A joke slips in. Why's winter like a bad guest? It stays too long and takes everything. You swallow it, the steward's glare a warning to keep moving. The hall's doors loom, torchlight spilling out. You carry another load, dodging a servant girl with a tray, her face pinched from cold. You nod, a flicker of shared struggle, like the mason's laborer or the chapel girl. Her cloak's thinner than yours, if that's possible. The hearth's blaze doesn't reach you, its warmth reserved for silk-clad nobles. You think of the dungeon's damp, the schoolroom's dust, each place a different frost, freezing you in the castle's grip. A second load lands, and you rub your hands, splinters stinging, no closer to warmth. A gust howls through the courtyard, rattling shutters. You remember that onion trick from the steward's whip, useless against winter's bite. A second joke. What's a servant's favorite fire? One they don't have to fetch wood for. You smirk, then wince as a log slips, bruising your shin. The steward's shadow hovers, his breath sour as he counts the logs. You grab another armful, the lean-to's stack dwindling, your fingers too numb to feel the bark. A boy nearby, hauling straw, sneezes, his cough wet and deep. Winter's not just cold, it's a killer, lurking like a wolf. The king's chambers, you've heard, have furs thick as clouds, braziers glowing day and night. He'll never know this chill, this ache. You wonder if he dreams of winter, if he cares about the wood you haul. Doubtful. His world's velvet, not frost. You dump another load, the hearth's crackle a cruel tease. The steward grunts, pointing to the lean-to again. You trudge back, the cold a weight heavier than any stone, the castle's hunger insatiable, gnawing at your bones as dusk deepens into night. You trudge back from the great hall, the firewood splinters still stinging your numb hands, the winter chill clawing deeper as night falls. The castle's courtyard is a shadow now, torches spitting against the dark, and you're headed to the infirmary, a low-roofed room near the kitchens. Your task is to deliver a sack of herbs, dried yarrow and feverfew, for the healer, a woman with eyes like flint and hands steadier than yours. The frost crunches underfoot, your breath a ghost in the air, as you weave past a cart stuck in ice. The sack's light but awkward, its burlap snagging on your tunic's tears, each step a fight against the cold and your own exhaustion. The infirmary's door creaks as you push through, the air inside thick with the tang of blood and boiled roots. A single brazier glows, casting flickers on straw-strewn floors where pallets hold the sick. Servants, mostly, their coughs wet and ragged. You set the herbs on a table cluttered with vials, the healer glancing up from a boy whose arms wrapped in stained cloth. She nods, pointing to a bucket of soiled bandages you're to scrub. You grab it, the stench hitting like a slap, and kneel by a basin, the water icy despite the room's faint warmth. Sickness stalks these halls, and you dread its touch, each cough a warning. Mainstream history notes medieval medicine was a mix of herbcraft and prayer, with castle infirmaries struggling against plagues and infections. This room, its walls damp with mold, sees more deaths than cures, especially in winter when fevers spread like wildfire. Historians still argue whether healers were respected for their skill or scapegoated for failures, their remedies often as deadly as the diseases. You see the boy's fevered eyes, the healer's tense jaw, and figure she's fighting a losing war, just like you. A quirky tidbit. Some healers used moon water, collected under a waxing moon, to wash wounds, believing it drew out poison. You glance at the basin, half wondering if this water's got that magic. Doubtful. It's murky, flecked with grime. You scrub, the bandage's crust flaking, and think of the chapel's salt, the walls' carved faces. Hope's a flicker, even here. A joke bubbles up. Why's an infirmary like a bad inn? You check in, but you might not check out. You swallow it, the healer's focus a silent warning to stay quiet. The room's heavy with moans, the brazier's heat barely denting the chill. You think of the firewood you hauled, the dungeon's damp, each task a thread in the castle's grim tapestry. A servant on a pallet coughs blood, and you flinch, scrubbing faster. The healer mutters a prayer, her hands grinding herbs, but you've seen enough to know prayers don't always work. That onion trick from the steward's whip feels childish now. No tears can dodge the plague. A woman nearby, her face gray, clutches a rosary, her lips moving silently. You nod, a reflex of solidarity, like with the firewood boy or the mason's laborer. The bandages are done, but the healer points to a floor streaked with mud and worse. You grab a broom, its bristles worn, and sweep, the rhythm familiar but heavier here. A second joke. What's a healer's favorite herb? The one that grows on graves. You bite your lip, the broom scraping. The boy on the pallet groans, his arms swollen under the wrap. You wonder if he's from the kitchens, the fields. Another cog, now broken. The castle grinds on, sickness or not, and you're still turning, your hands raw, your chest tight with dread. The king's never seen this room, you bet. His fevers, if he gets them, are tended in silk-draped chambers, with wine, not moon water. You envy his distance, then push it down. Envy's a fever, too. The healer snaps for you to empty the basin, and you haul it outside, the night's cold a shock after the infirmary's fug. Ice glints on the cobblestones, and you pour, the water steaming briefly. The castle's towers loom, indifferent, as you head back. The healer's next order already waiting. Another turn in the relentless wheel. You leave the infirmary, the stench of blood and herbs clinging to your hands. The night's frost sharper now as you step into the courtyard. The castle's asleep mostly, save for flickering torches and the distant howl of wind. Your next task pulls you to the great hall again, but not for nobles' feasts. You're to help the jester prepare for his evening performance, a rare splash of color in this gray world. You carry a sack of props, bells, a patched cloak, a wooden sword. It's weight light compared to stones or firewood, but your arms still ache from the day's grind. The hall's quieter now, the long table cleared, though the air holds the ghost of roasted boar and spilled wine. The jester, a wiry man with eyes too sharp for his motley, rummages through the sack as you set it down. His bells jingle, a false cheer, and he hands you a lute to tune, though you've never touched one. You fumble the strings, their twang sour, while he practices a tumble, landing with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. Your job's to fetch props and stay out of his way, but his words are quick, laced with barbs about lords you both serve. "Careful," he whispers. "One bad jest, and I'm in the dungeon." You nod, knowing his tightrope's thinner than yours. Mainstream history shows jesters were more than fools, often sharp-witted advisors cloaked in humor, their performances a delicate dance of truth and flattery. In this hall, the jester's act entertains the king and his court, but a misstep could cost his head. Historians still argue whether jesters held real influence or were just pets, their wit a leash held by the powerful. You see the jester's trembling hands, tuning his own bells, and guess he's more pawn than player like you. A quirky tidbit: some jesters hid luck charms, rabbit feet or carved bones, in their costumes, believing they'd dodge a lord's wrath. You spot a small bulge in his sleeve, maybe such a charm, and wonder if it saved him yet. The lute's strings bite your fingers, still raw from bandages, and you wince, thinking of the infirmary's fevered moans, the wall's dust. A joke bubbles up. Why's a jester like a candle? Both burn bright, but one bad gust, and they're out. You swallow it, the jester's quick glance a warning to stay focused. The hall's shadows dance as you light torches, their glow catching the tapestry's threads. The jester rehearses a quip about a knight's bad aim, and you stifle a laugh. It's bold, maybe too bold. You think of the dungeon's curse marks, the healer's moon water. Hope's a flicker, even in jest. He tosses you a prop sword. It's wood-chipped, and you catch it, barely. Look lively, he snaps, but there's a flicker of camaraderie, like the nods from the infirmary woman or the field peasant. You're both cogs, just with different masks. A noble enters, his cloak sweeping, and the jester's grin snaps on like armor. You fade to the wall, clutching the lute, invisible again. The noble doesn't glance your way, but his presence shifts the air, heavy as the steward's whip. A second joke. What's a jester's favorite audience? One that laughs instead of swings. You bite your lip, tuning the lute's last string, its note still off. The jester juggles now, bells chiming, but his eyes dart to the noble, weighing every move. You fetch a painted mask from the sack, its grin grotesque, and hand it over, your hands shaking, not just from cold. The king's due soon, his throne gleaming at the hall's head. He'll laugh, maybe, or scowl, and the jester's fate hangs on it. You've seen the king's ease, his silk world untouched by your firewood, or the infirmary's blood. The jester knows it too, his jest's a fragile shield. You light another torch, the flame wavering, and the hall fills, nobles murmuring. You slip to the shadows, props done, the jester's performance a fire you've stoked but won't share. The castle's wheel turns and you're already bracing for the next task, the next risk in this relentless grind. You slip from the great hall, the jester's bells fading as the noble's laughter swells, a sound as distant from your world as the king's silk. The night's deepened, the castle's stones radiating cold, and you're headed to the battlements, where guards keep lonely watch. Your task is to deliver a sack of bread and ale to the night sentries, a job that means climbing icy steps to the castle's highest walls. The courtyard's a flicker of torchlight, servants vanishing into shadows, and you heft the sack, its weight pulling at your shoulders, still sore from firewood and stones. The wind howls as you start the ascent, frost slick under your worn shoes, each step a test of balance and will. The battlements are a jagged crown, wind-whipped and desolate. You reach the top, breath puffing in clouds, and spot a guard, his rusted helm glinting under a torch. He's pacing, cloak flapping, his spear's butt tapping the stone. You set the sack down, ale sloshing, and he grunts, tearing into the bread without a word. You're to stay, sweeping the rampart's grit, snow, dust, bird droppings, while he eats. The broom's handle is splintered, like everything here, and you sweep, the wind stealing each pile before it forms. The guard's eyes, sunken, track the darkness beyond the walls, where enemies or wolves might lurk. Mainstream history notes medieval castle guards were often low-born men, paid in rations and fear, their long shifts on battlements a grind of cold and boredom, punctuated by rare bursts of violence. These walls, studded with arrow slits, have held against sieges, but the guards' lives are as fragile as your own. Historians still argue whether their role was vital defense or mere posturing, a show of strength for the king's ego. You feel the guard's hunched shoulders, his cracked lips, and lean toward the former. His watch keeps the castle breathing, even if no one cares. A quirky tidbit. Some guards tied warding knots in their cloaks, believing they'd shield against night spirits. You notice a tangle in the guard's hem, maybe such a knot, though it's not saving him from the cold. You sweep, grit stinging your eyes, and think of the jester's luck charm, the healer's moon water. Hope's a thread, fraying in this wind. A joke bubbles up. Why's a guard like a star? Both shine at night, but nobody notices. You swallow it. The brooms scrape louder than the wind's moan. The battlement's edge is close, a sheer drop to the moat below. You keep your distance, the guard's spear a reminder of his authority, however small. You think of the infirmary's coughs, the jester's tightrope, each task a different vigil, all under the castle's weight. The guard drains the ale, wiping his mouth, and mutters about a strange light in the valley. You pause, broom still, but see nothing, just black. He shrugs, pacing again, and you resume sweeping, the cold numbing your fingers, raw from herbs and props. A second guard appears, his armor clanking, and you nod. A reflex of solidarity, like with the jester's glance or the infirmary woman. His face is shadowed, but his cough's familiar, winter's mark, like the boy in the healer's care. The castle binds you, its walls both shield and cage. A second joke. What's a battlement's favorite story? One where the enemy never shows up. You bite your lip, sweeping faster as the first guard barks for you to finish. The wind carries your pile away, a futile task, like so many others. The king's safe below, his chambers warm, his sleep undisturbed by this watch. You wonder if he knows the guards' names, if he feels their cold. Doubtful. His world's feasts, not frost. You think of that onion trick from the steward's whip, useless here, where tears freeze. The sack's empty, the rampart's as clean as it'll get, and the guard waves you off, already pacing. You descend, the steps treacherous, the castle's pulse faint but unyielding, pulling you toward the next task, the next turn in its frozen, relentless wheel. You descend from the battlements, the wind's bite lingering on your face, the guard's lonely pacing etched in your mind. The castle's shadows deepen, torches sputtering as you cross the courtyard, your next task pulling you to the stables for the lord's hunting party. You're to carry feed sacks to the grooms, who ready horses for a dawn boar hunt. The air's thick with frost and the musky tang of hay, the stables a low, warm hum of snorts and shifting hooves. You heft a sack, its grain heavy, and shuffle inside, straw crunching underfoot. A groom, his hands calloused, grabs it with a grunt, pointing to a pile of more sacks needing moving. Your back protests, still sore from stones and firewood. But you nod, the work as relentless as the night's cold. The stables glow faintly, lanterns swinging as grooms brush down sleek horses, their coats gleaming for nobles who'll ride at first light. You haul another sack, dust puffing, and dodge a stallion's restless kick. The hunt's a thrill for lords, a chance to flaunt skill. But for you, it's just another chore. Feed the beasts, clean the stalls, stay out of the way. A noble's voice cuts through, mocking a groom's clumsy knot, and you keep your head down, knowing their laughter stings sharper than whips. You're invisible, unless you falter, just like on the battlements or in the hall. Mainstream history shows medieval hunts were noble spectacles, blending sport and status, with boars or stags as prizes to flaunt power. This stable, bustling for the hunt, serves the king's court, but the labor falls on you and the grooms, not the silk-clad riders. Historians still argue whether hunts were vital for food or merely pageantry, a way for lords to play at war while peasants starved. Your empty stomach, growling as you lift another sack, leans toward the latter. Those boars will feed the great hall, not you. A quirky tidbit. Some hunters wore beast charms, boar tusks or hawk feathers, believing they'd draw prey closer. You spot a feather tucked in a groom's belt, maybe such a charm, though the horses seem unimpressed. You haul a sack to a stall, grain spilling, and think of the guard's warding knot, the jester's hidden bone. Hope's a flicker, even in straw. A joke bubbles up. Why's a hunt like a bad dream? You're always chasing something you can't catch. You swallow it, the groom's sharp glance a reminder to stay focused. The stable's heat is a brief reprieve, but sweat mixes with frost on your skin. You think of the infirmary's moans, the battlement's wind, each task a different beast, all clawing at you. A noble strides in, his boots polished, barking about a lame horse. The groom scrambles, and you move faster, stacking sacks. The noble's scorn a whip you both feel. A second sack slips, grazing your shin, and you hiss but keep going. The castle's hierarchy is clear. Lords hunt, you haul, and the king reaps the glory, his table heavy with game you'll never taste. A groom, wiping sweat, mutters about a horse's hoof, and you nod, a flicker of solidarity, like with the guard or the healer's patient. His hands are cracked, like yours, marked by the castle's grind. A second joke. What's a groom's favorite horse? One that doesn't kick him into next week. You bite your lip, stacking another sack, the stable's rhythm relentless. The noble's gone, but his voice lingers, a reminder of the hunt's stakes. Not just boars, but pride. You wonder if the king joins tomorrow, his bow steady while you're still hauling at dawn. The grooms finish, horses snorting, ready for the chase. Your sacks are done, but a groom points to a spilled pile of oats. Sweep it now. You grab a broom, the motion familiar, like the infirmary's filth or the battlement's grit. The castle's wheel turns, each task a spoke, and you're caught, spinning. The king's hunt will echo with horns and cheers, but you'll be here, in the straw, the cold, the endless labor, chasing nothing but survival under his untouched reign. You leave the stables, the horses' snorts and the groom's grumbles fading as you step back into the night's frost. The castle's courtyard is a flicker of torchlight, the air sharp with frozen mud and smoke. Your next task drags you to the market square, just beyond the outer gate, where a weekly bustle of traders and thieves hums despite the cold. You're to barter a basket of eggs, gathered from the castle's hens, for salt and thread. Essentials the steward demands by dawn. The basket's light but fragile, each egg a risk as you cradle it, weaving through the gate where guards eye you like a stray dog. The market's a chaos of shouts, lanterns swaying, and the tang of fish and damp wool. You push into the crowd, stalls crammed with turnips, clay pots, and questionable meat. A trader, his beard flecked with ice, haggles over your eggs, offering half the salt you need. You argue, voice hoarse, knowing the steward's whip awaits if you fail. Thieves lurk, their eyes glinting, and you clutch the basket tighter, dodging a cart that nearly crushes your foot. The market's a battlefield, every deal a skirmish, and you're no knight, just a servant gambling with shells. A woman barters cloth nearby, her hands red from cold, and you nod, a reflex of shared struggle, like with the groom or the battlement guard. Mainstream history notes medieval markets were vital, linking castles to villages, their trade sustaining life through goods and gossip. This square, muddy and loud, feeds the castle's kitchens and rumors, but it's a cutthroat game for servants like you. Historians still argue whether markets empowered the lower classes, giving them leverage, or just tightened their chains, with lords taxing every coin. Your empty pockets, bartering the king's eggs for his gain, suggest the latter as you haggle, the traders smirk a blade. A quirky tidbit. Some traders slipped charm stones into deals, claiming they ensured fair trades. You spot a smooth pebble in the trader's palm, maybe such a stone, but his stingy offer says it's no help. You settle for less salt, more thread, and move on, thinking of the stable's beast charm, the guard's warding knot. Hope's a coin, spent fast. A joke bubbles up. Why's a market like a wolf? It'll eat you if you don't watch your step. You swallow it, dodging a thief's brush, your eggs still intact, barely. The square's chaos presses in, shouts, a dropped basket, a dog snarling over scraps. You think of the hunt's polished horses, the jester's bells, different worlds, same castle grind. The trader's salt weighs down your basket now, thread tucked beside it. But a child bumps you, and an egg cracks, yolk oozing. You curse under your breath, heart sinking. The steward won't care for excuses. A second trader, selling fish, eyes your remaining eggs, but you're wary, his grin too sharp. You barter quickly, gaining a small sack of salt, your hands shaking from cold and nerves. A second joke. What's a servant's favorite market deal? One where they keep their fingers. You bite your lip, weaving back through the crowd, the basket lighter but your chest heavy. A woman selling herbs, her face lined, offers a sprig of thyme for luck. You shake your head, no coin, no luck, but her nod echoes the stable groom's, a flicker of kinship. The castle looms beyond the gate, its towers indifferent to your small victory. You pass the guards, their spears glinting, and feel the market's weight linger, a reminder of the steward's whip, the king's untouchable ease. The king's never haggled, never felt a thief's shadow. His salt comes easy, his thread fine, while you risk everything for crumbs. You think of that onion trick from days ago, useless in this square's sharp dance. The market's noise fades as you re-enter the castle, the gate's thud final. Your eggs are gone, the salt and thread barely enough, and the steward's glare awaits. The castle's wheel spins, each barter a spoke, and you're caught, trudging toward the next task, the next risk in this relentless grind. You trudge back through the castle gate, the market's clamor fading, the basket of salt and thread a meager prize in your frozen hands. The courtyard's a flicker of torchlight, frost glinting on cobblestones, and your next task looms, helping stockpile grain in the storehouse, a precaution against the siege rumors whispering through the castle. The air's sharp, your breath clouding as you head to a squat building near the outer wall, its door heavy with iron. Inside, the air's thick with dust and the sweet rot of barley, sacks piled high under low beams. You're to haul more from a cart outside, each sack a beast that strains your shoulders, still aching from eggs, firewood, and stones. A keeper, his face creased like old leather, points to the cart with a grunt, his lantern swaying. You grab a sack, its burlap rough, and drag it inside, dust puffing with each step. The storehouse is a fortress within a fortress, its walls thick to thwart thieves and rats. You stack the grain, sweat mixing with frost, while the keeper counts, his voice a low mutter. A siege could come, bandits, rival lords, or worse, and this grain's the castle's lifeline, though you'll starve before the king does. You think of the market's thieves, the battlement guard's vigil. Fear's a thread weaving through every task, tightening now as you haul another sack, your back screaming. Mainstream history confirms medieval castles stockpiled food for sieges, with storehouses like this one holding grain, salted meat, and ale to outlast enemies. This castle, perched on its hill, has survived blockades, but the cost falls on you, laborers filling the king's stores while scraping by on gruel. Historians still argue whether such preparations were strategic genius or paranoid excess, draining resources for wars that often never came. Your burning muscles, the keeper's sharp eye, vote for excess as you stack another sack, the pile growing while your strength shrinks. A quirky tidbit. Some keepers hung rat charms, dried owl feathers, over grain, believing they'd scare pests. You spot a feather dangling above, swaying in the draft, but a rat's squeak says it's useless. You keep hauling, thinking of the market's charm stone, the jester's hidden bone. Hope's a grain, easily crushed. A joke bubbles up. Why's a storehouse like a dragon's hoard? It's full of treasure, but you'll never touch it. You swallow it, the keeper's glare a whip sharper than the steward's. The cart's sacks dwindle, but the work's relentless, dust clogging your throat. You think of the hunt's horses, the infirmary's moans, each task a different siege, the castle itself your enemy. A second sack slips, grazing your foot, and you hiss, but keep moving. The keeper mutters about last year's spoiled barley, a loss that meant tighter rations for servants, not lords. You nod, a reflex of solidarity, like with the market woman or the stable groom. His hands, gnarled, bear the same scars as yours. Labor's mark, the castle's brand. A distant horn sounds, maybe a guard signal, and you pause, heart jumping. The keeper doesn't flinch, but the siege rumors creep closer, a shadow heavier than the sacks. A second joke. What's a siege's favorite game? Starve the servant, spare the king. You bite your lip, stacking faster. The grains weight a reminder of what's at stake. You think of that onion trick from the steward's days, useless against hunger's bite. A rat skitters across the floor, bold, and you swing the sack, missing. The keeper snorts, a rare crack in his stone face, echoing the dungeon guard's grim humor. The king's never seen this storehouse, never felt its dust. His table stays full, siege or not, while you stock his survival. You wonder if he fears the rumors, if he sleeps easy. Doubtful. His world's silk, not sacks. The keeper points to the last cartload, and you trudge outside, the frost a shock after the storehouse's fug. The castle's towers loom, their strength built on your sweat, your hunger. You grab another sack, the wheel turning, each grain a piece of the castle's unyielding grip, pulling you toward the next task, the next fight. You stumble from the storehouse, grain dust coating your throat, the siege rumors still gnawing at your thoughts as you cross the frost-crusted courtyard. The castle's towers loom, their shadows long in the torchlight, and your next task pulls you to the great hall, where a wedding's preparations hum, a forced union to seal an alliance. You're to carry trays of candied fruits, a rare delicacy, to the banquet table, your hands still raw from sacks and market barters. The air bites as you weave through servants hauling linens and wine, the hall's doors aglow with warmth you won't share. Inside, the air's thick with honey and wax, tapestries brightened by 100 candles, but the mood's heavy, the bride's fate a chain you can almost see. You set the tray down, sugared plums glinting, and a steward snaps for you to fetch more from the kitchen. The bride, a girl barely older than you, sits rigid in silk, her eyes wet but unyielding. Her groom, a dour lord twice her age, muttering to his men. You slip through the crowd, nobles in furs ignoring you, their laughter sharp as the market's thieves. The wedding's a pact, not love, tying the king's allies against those siege whispers. You think of the storehouse's grain, the battlement's watch, every task a brick in the castle's power, built on tears like hers. Mainstream history confirms medieval marriages were often political, with noblewomen traded like coin to secure treaties or lands. This bride, likely bartered for a rival's loyalty, faces a life of duty, her heart irrelevant. Historians still argue whether such unions strengthened kingdoms or sowed resentment, weakening them from within. You see her clenched hands, the groom's cold nod, and bet on resentment, your own exhaustion. A mirror to her trapped silence as you haul another tray. The fruit's sweetness mocking your hunger. A quirky tidbit. Some brides wore binding ribbons, woven with herbs, believing they'd ensure loyalty, or at least obedience. You spot a green thread at her wrist, maybe such a ribbon, but her eyes say no charm can bind her heart. You set the tray, dodging a noble's elbow, and think of the storehouse's rat charm, the market's stone, hope's a veil, thin as her silk. A joke bubbles up. Why's a wedding like a siege? Both trap you, and surrender's the only way out. You swallow it, the steward's glare a whip you know too well. The hall's a swirl of color, minstrels tuning lutes, but the bride's stillness cuts through. You think of the jester's tightrope, the healer's losing fight. Different chains, same castle. A second tray wobbles, and you catch it, heart racing. A spill could mean the stocks. The groom laughs, loud and hollow, and you wonder if he sees her tears. Probably not. His world's power, like the king's, untouched by this hall's undercurrent of loss. You fetch another tray, the kitchen's heat a faint echo of the forge, your hands trembling from cold and strain. A servant girl, polishing goblets, meets your eyes, her nod a flicker of solidarity, like the storehouse keeper or the stable groom. Her hands are cracked, like yours, marked by the castle's grind. A second joke. What's a bride's favorite vow? One she gets to choose. You bite your lip, setting the fruit, its scent dizzying against your empty stomach. The minstrels play, a tune too cheerful for the bride's pale face. You think of that onion trick from the steward's whip, useless here. No tears can hide this truth. A noble grabs a plum, sugar dusting his beard, and you fade to the wall, invisible. The wedding's weight heavier than any sack. The king's throne sits empty. He'll arrive later, sealing the alliance with a nod, his hands clean of this bargain. You wonder if he knows her name, if he cares about her silent grief. Doubtful. His world's silk and strategy, not sacrifice. The steward points to another task, more trays, more fruit, and you move. The halls glow a lie. The bride's ribbon catches the light, a fragile charm against a life she didn't choose. The castle's wheel turns, each vow a spoke, and you're caught, trudging toward the next task, the next link in this relentless chain. You slip from the great hall, the bride's silent tears, and the cloying scent of candied fruit lingering as you step back into the castle's frost-bitten night. The courtyard's a hush of torchlight, the air sharp with ice, and your next task drags you to the brewhouse, a low stone building where ale, the castle's lifeblood, is born in stinking vats. You're to stir the mash, a job that promises warmth but delivers fumes and ache. Your hands, raw from trays and grain sacks, clutch a wooden paddle as you push through the brewhouse door. The air hits like a wave, sour yeast, damp wood, and a heat that's more oppressive than comforting. The brewer, a squat man with a face like boiled leather, grunts and points to a steaming vat, its surface bubbling like a witch's cauldron. You grip the paddle, stirring the heavy mash, the motion jarring your shoulders, still sore from the storehouse and market barters. Fumes sting your eyes, worse than the infirmary's blood or the forge's smoke, and you blink hard, sweat mixing with frost on your brow. The brewhouse churns day and night, feeding the king's feasts and the guards' rations, but you'll be lucky to sip the dregs. A younger boy, stirring another vat, coughs, his face red from heat, and you nod, a reflex of solidarity, like with the wedding servant or the storehouse keeper. The brewer barks to keep the rhythm, his voice cutting through the vat's gurgle. Mainstream history notes, medieval ale was a staple, safer than water, and brewed in castles to sustain everyone from knights to servants. This brewhouse, its vats scarred from years of use, keeps the castle's pulse steady, but the labor's grueling, the air a poison you breathe with every stir. Historians still argue whether brewing was a craft with status or just another slog, its workers valued only for output, not skill. Your burning eyes, the paddle's weight, vote for slog as you stir, the mash resisting like mud. A quirky tidbit. Some brewers added blessed hops, sprinkled by priests, believing they'd make ale stronger or ward off curses. You spot a small sack by the brewer's bench, maybe holding such hops, but the fumes suggest no blessing here. You keep stirring, thinking of the wedding's binding ribbon, the storehouse's owl feather, hope's a bubble, popping fast. A joke bubbles up. Why's a brewhouse like a dragon? It's hot, it stinks, and you're always dodging its breath. You swallow it, the brewer's scowl a whip you've learned to dodge. The vat's heat seeps into your bones, a cruel tease after the courtyard's frost. You think of the bride's trapped silence, the battlement's lonely watch, each task a different brew, bitter and unending. The boy coughs again, and you glance over, his paddle slowing. The brewer snaps, and you stir faster, fumes clawing your throat. That onion trick from the steward's whip feels like a child's game now. No tears can mask this sting. A second stir splashes mash on your arm, the burn sharp, and you hiss, but keep going. The brewer's eyes like hawks. A second joke. What's a brewer's favorite song? Boil and bubble, toil and trouble. You bite your lip, the paddle's rhythm relentless. The boy meets your gaze, his nod faint, his hands blistered like yours. The castle binds you, its ale a chain you both forge. You wonder if this batch will reach the king's goblet or just the guard's mugs. Probably both. The king drinks deep, his feasts untouched by this vat's reek, while you stir his pleasure, your own thirst a distant dream. The brewer points to another vat, its mash thicker, and you shuffle over, paddle dragging. The boy's cough worsens, and you think of the infirmary's pallets, the healer's losing fight. Sickness and fumes are cousins here, and you're caught in their grip. The castle's wheel turns, each stir a spoke, and you're spinning, the brewhouse's heat a lie against the cold truth. The king's ease is built on your sweat, your sting, your endless labor. You stir, the fumes of fog, bracing for the next task, the next turn in this relentless grind. You stagger from the brewhouse, the sour sting of ale fumes still burning your eyes, the paddle's weight lingering in your shoulders as you step into the castle's icy night. The courtyard's a flicker of dying torches, frost crunching under your worn shoes, and your next task pulls you to the scriptorium, a dim chamber where scribes labor over manuscripts. You're to deliver a stack of parchment and refill ink pots, a job that sounds gentle, but promises cramped hands and aching eyes. The air bites as you clutch the parchment bundle, its edges sharp against your raw palms, and climb a narrow stair to the scriptorium's door. Inside, the air's thick with wax and dust, candlelight flickering over hunched figures, scratching quills across vellum. You set the parchment on a table, its wood scarred from years of knives trimming reeds. A scribe, his fingers stained black, glances up, his eyes red from strain, and points to a row of empty ink pots. You nod, grabbing a jug of ink, its weight sloshing as you pour, careful not to spill. Ink's costly, and a drop could mean a night without bread. The scriptorium's quiet, save for Quill's faint scratches and the occasional cough. But the silence is heavy, each scribe bent under the castle's demand for records, prayers, and laws. You think of the brewhouse's fumes, the wedding's forced vows, different labors, same relentless wheel. Mainstream history confirms medieval scriptoria were hubs of knowledge, producing books and charters that shaped kingdoms, often in castles or monasteries. This room, its shelves heavy with vellum, preserves the king's decrees and the church's words. But the scribes are as bound as you, their lives traded for ink and candlelight. Historians still argue whether scribes were revered scholars or mere tools, their work a path to influence or just another cage. Your stinging fingers, smudged with ink as you pour, vote for cage, the scribe's hunched backs a mirror to your own exhaustion. A quirky tidbit. Some scribes hid secret marks, tiny drawings or initials, in margins, believing they'd protect their souls from the toil's curse. You spot a faint sketch of a bird on a discarded scrap, maybe such a mark, though the scribe's grim face suggests no salvation. You keep pouring, thinking of the brewhouse's blessed hops, the wedding's ribbon, hope's a scratch, easily erased. A joke bubbles up. Why's a scribe like a ghost? Both leave marks, but nobody sees them. You swallow it, the ink's acrid scent sharper than the steward's whip. The scriptorium's glow is feeble, candles guttering as a draft sneaks through a cracked window. You think of the storehouse's dust, the battlement's wind, each task a different ink, staining you deeper. An inkpot overflows, black pooling, and you curse softly, wiping it with your sleeve. The scribe doesn't notice, his quill relentless, copying a charter you'll never read. That onion trick from days ago feels foolish here. No tears can blur this grind. A second scribe, older, rubs his wrist, his nod a flicker of solidarity, like the brewhouse boy or the market woman. His fingers are gnarled, ink a second skin, the castle's mark. A second joke. What's a scriptorium's favorite silence? The kind where the quill doesn't snap. You bite your lip, refilling another pot. The jug lighter now, but your arms heavier. The scribes write for the king, his laws and lineage etched for eternity, while you pour their ink, your own name forgotten. You wonder if he's ever held a quill, felt its cramp. Doubtful, his world seals and signatures, not stains. A candle spits, wax dripping, and you dodge it, the parchment stack still waiting. You carry it to another table, the scribe's scratches a rhythm like the brewhouse's stir, binding you all. The head scribe, his voice a rasp, gestures for you to sweep the floor. Dust, wax, reed shavings. You grab a broom, the motion familiar, like the storehouse or infirmary, and sweep, the pile growing as your energy fades. The castle's wheel turns, each quill a spoke, and you're caught, spinning. The king's charters pile high, his power inked on your labor, while you're left with smudges and aches. You finish, the scribe waving you off, and slip out, the scriptorium's weight clinging, heavier than ink, as you brace for the next task, the next turn in this relentless grind. You slip from the scriptorium, ink smudges darkening your fingers, the scribe's hunched silence trailing you like a shadow as you descend the narrow stair. The castle's night is a deep freeze now, torches barely holding back the dark, and your next task pulls you to a shadowed corner of the keep, where whispers of treason hum like wasps. You're to carry a bundle of firewood to a small chamber where the steward meets with guards, their voices low, plotting against a rival lord, or so the rumors say. The courtyard's a maze of frost and flickering light, and you heft the logs, splinters biting your raw hands, each step heavy with the day's toll, ink, ale, eggs, and stones. The chamber's door, half hidden behind a tapestry, creaks as you approach, the air thick with wax and suspicion. You set the firewood by a small hearth, its embers barely alive, and a guard, his face scarred, gestures for you to stoke it. You kneel, feeding logs to the flame, the heat a faint tease against your numb fingers. The steward's there, his beady eyes glinting, murmuring to two men in cloaks you don't recognize. Their words are sharp, clipped. Something about a letter, a betrayal, a name you shouldn't know. You keep your head down, heart thumping, knowing one overheard word could land you in the dungeon's chains. You're invisible, unless you listen too closely, and the castle's secrets are a blade you can't dodge. Mainstream history confirms medieval castles were hotbeds of intrigue, with treasonous plots often hatched in shadowed rooms like this, as lords and stewards schemed to shift power. This keep, loyal to the king, still breeds distrust. Its alliance is fragile as the frost outside. Historians still argue whether such plots were bold grabs for freedom or reckless gambits that crushed more than they gained. Your pounding pulse, the steward's hushed tone, leans toward reckless as you stoke the fire. The logs crackle, masking words you're better off not hearing. A quirky tidbit. Some plotters used shadow marks, charcoal scratches on walls, to signal meetings, believing they'd vanish in smoke. You spot a faint smudge near the hearth, maybe such a mark, though it could just be soot. You keep stoking, thinking of the scriptorium's hidden bird, the brewhouse's blessed hops. Hope's a spark, snuffed fast. A joke bubbles up. Why's a plot like a fire? It warms you till it burns you. You swallow it, the steward's glance a whip sharper than any you felt. The chamber's air is heavy, not just with smoke, but with the weight of secrets. You think of the wedding's forced vows, the storehouse's siege fears, each task a different shadow, cast by the same castle. The guard shifts, his sword clinking, and you flinch, the poker trembling in your hand. That onion trick from the steward's whip is a distant memory. No tears can hide you here. A second log catches, flames licking, and you ease back, the steward's voice dropping lower. You catch a fragment, something about a rival's gold, and freeze, praying they didn't notice. They don't, but your chest tightens, the dungeon's groans echoing in your mind. A second joke. What's a trader's favorite song? One nobody else hears. You bite your lip, piling the last logs, the fire now steady. A servant slips in, carrying wine, and you nod, a flicker of solidarity, like with the scribe or the market woman. His eyes are wide, catching the same tension you feel. The castle binds you, its plots a chain you both skirt. The steward snaps for you to leave, and you scramble up, the poker clattering. The cloaked men don't look, their whispers a hum that follows you to the door. The king's name wasn't mentioned, but his shadow looms, his throne the prize or the target. You wonder if he sleeps soundly, if he senses the knives in the dark. Probably not. His world's silk, not suspicion. You slip behind the tapestry, the corridor's cold, a shock after the chamber's fug. The castle's wheel turns, each secret a spoke, and you're caught, spinning, the firewood's weight nothing compared to the dread you carry. You trudge toward the next task, the next risk, the steward's eyes still burning in your mind. the castle's grip tighter than ever. You slip from the shadowed chamber, the steward's whispered plots, and the fire's crackle fading as you step into the castle's icy corridors. The knight's grip is absolute now, frost glazing the stones, and your next task pulls you to the courtyard, where a rare festival is unfolding. A brief spark of joy to appease the castle's weary souls. You're to carry baskets of bread to the trestle tables, a job that promises warmth and music, but delivers the same ache as every other. Your hands, still smudged with soot and ink, clutch the baskets, their crusts fragrant, but not for you. The courtyard glows with bonfires, laughter, and the twang of lutes, a stark contrast to the treasonous murmurs you just fled. You weave through dancers, their shadows leaping, and set the bread down, a steward's nod, your only thanks. The festival's a fleeting gift, sanctioned by the king to keep the lower ranks from breaking. You're allowed to linger, even dance if you dare, but hunger and exhaustion chain you tighter than any dungeon. You spot a girl spinning to the music, her patched cloak flaring, and for a moment, you forget the mud, the fumes, the secrets. You hand out loaves, dodging a drunken groom's stumble, and steal a glance at the firelit faces. Servants, peasants, even a few guards, their eyes bright with rare abandon. Your stomach growls. The bread's scent a torment, but you move on, tasked with fetching more from the kitchen stores. Mainstream history notes medieval festivals, often tied to harvests or saints' days, were brief respites for the laboring classes, with food and music to ease their grind. This courtyard, alive with song, mirrors those moments. But the king's generosity is calculated, his throne bolstered by sated workers. Historians still argue whether such events were true relief or just a leash, letting the oppressed breathe before tightening again. Your aching feet, the basket's weight, lean toward leash as you trudge back, the music fading, the steward's eye ever watchful. A quirky tidbit. Some festival goers wore joy charms, twisted straw figures, believing they'd hold the night's happiness. You spot one pinned to a maid's cloak, its shape crude but hopeful, and wonder if it works. Probably not, but you'd weave one if you had the straw. You haul another basket, thinking of the treason chamber's shadow mark, the scriptorium's bird, hopes a crumb, snatched fast. A joke bubbles up. Why's a festival like a dream? You wake up and the work's still there. You swallow it, the steward's glare a familiar whip. The courtyard's warmth is a lie. The bonfire's no match for winter's bite. You think of the brewhouse's fumes, the wedding's tears. Each task, a different mask. This one painted with joy. A dancer bumps you, laughing, and you nod. A flicker of solidarity, like with the treason servant or the brewhouse boy. Her smile's real, but her hands are cracked, like yours, the castle's mark. You set the bread, a child grabbing a crust, and you don't stop her. Small rebellions matter. A second basket lands, and you weave back, the lute's tune tugging at you to stay, to dance. But the kitchen calls. A second joke. What's a servant's favorite dance? One where the steward doesn't step on your toes. You bite your lip, the baskets weave, cutting your palms. The king's not here. He watches from a balcony, maybe, his silk untouched by this fleeting cheer. You wonder if he feels the crowd's pulse, if he knows their hunger. Doubtful, his world's feasts, not crumbs. A guard joins the dance, his spear leaning against a wall, and you envy his moment of ease, then push it down. Envy's a spark. Too dangerous tonight. The steward snaps for more bread, and you trudge to the kitchen, the festival's glow dimming. You think of that onion trick from the steward's whip, useless against this bittersweet ache. The courtyard's joy is a borrowed cloak, too thin for the cold truth. Tomorrow, the grind returns. You grab another basket, the music a faint hum, and head back. The castle's wheel turning, each loaf a spoke, and you're caught, spinning. The festival's light already fading as you brace for the next task, the next turn in this relentless chain. You trudge back from the festival, the courtyard's fleeting music and laughter dissolving into the night's frost as you clutch the last empty basket, its weave worn as your hands. The castle's towers loom, their stone cold and final. And your final task, is a rare glimpse into the king's world. You're to deliver a bundle of linens to his private chambers, high in the keep. The air bites as you climb a spiral stair, each step echoing the day's toll: bread, secrets, ink, and mud. The corridor narrows, torches dim, and the chamber's door, carved with lions, feels like a threshold to another realm. You knock, a chamberlain's curt nod letting you in, and step into a world of silk and firelight, alien to your straw mattress and hunger. The room's a dream of luxury: furs draped over a canopied bed, a brazier glowing with coals, tapestries woven with gold thread. You set the linens on a chest, their softness mocking your patched tunic, and the chamberlain points to a hearth needing stoking. You kneel, feeding logs, the warmth a cruel tease, reserved for the king who's absent, likely at the festival's balcony, basking in his court's adoration. His world's untouched by the castle's grind, his bed a haven where no steward's whip or siege rumor dares intrude. You think of the festival's crumbs, the bride's tears, every task a step further from this ease, yet here you are, stoking his fire. Mainstream history confirms medieval kings lived in opulence, their chambers a stark contrast to the squalor of servants and peasants, their power built on the labor of castles like this. This room, with its silver goblets and velvet cushions, is the heart of that divide, the king's comfort a monument to your suffering. Historians still argue whether such luxury insulated rulers from their people's pain or made them blind to brewing revolts. Your calloused hands, the fire's heat you'll never keep, vote for blindness as you stoke. The logs crackle a faint echo of the courtyard's bonfires. A quirky tidbit: some kings slept with dreamstones under their pillows, believing they'd bring visions of victory. You spot a smooth, polished stone on the bed, maybe such a charm, and wonder if it soothes his sleep. Probably. His world's free of dungeon groans or brewhouse fumes. You rise, the chamberlain waving you out, and think of the festival's straw charm, the scribe's hidden mark. Hope's a luxury, hoarded here. A joke bubbles up. Why's a king's bed like a throne? Both hold him above the rest of us. You swallow it, the chamberlain's stare sharper than the steward's whip. The room's glow lingers as you leave, its warmth a memory you can't hold. You think of the scriptorium's ink, the treason chamber's whispers, each task a thread in the castle's tapestry, woven for his glory. That onion trick from days ago is a ghost. No tears reach this height. A second joke: what's a king's favorite dream? One where the castle runs itself. You bite your lip, the stare's cold, a shock after the chamber's fug. A servant passes, hauling water, and you nod, a final flicker of solidarity, like with the festival maid or the brewhouse boy. His eyes are hollow, like yours, the castle's mark. The king's luxury is the castle's truth. He thrives, you break. You wonder if he knows your name, if he sees the hands that stoke his fire. Doubtful. His world's silk, not splinters. The corridor stretches, the wheel turning, but your tasks end here, the day's grind fading into a weary haze. You descend, the castle's pulse slowing, its demands quiet for now, though tomorrow waits, relentless as ever. The castle settles, its stones whispering as you find your straw mattress, the night's frost creeping through the attic's cracks. You curl up, the day's aches, mud, ink, fire, and fear, softening into a dull hum. The festival's lutes, the bride's ribbon, the king's silk bed fade, their edges blurring like a dream. You're safe here, for now. The castle's wheel paused, its grip loosening as sleep tugs. Picture the stars beyond the walls, their light steady, untouched by whips or vats. Let the wind's low moan, the straw's faint rustle, carry you. You've carried enough. Baskets, secrets, stones. Rest now. Let the dark hold you gently. Its quiet a gift. The castle waits, but it can wait a little longer. Sleep, breathe, drift, sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.